Well, it's May the 1st. Obviously, everything's going down today in the local elections. We'll probably end up covering that stuff on probably Thursday evening. Certainly on Friday as well, we'll be having a look at that, certainly into the weekend as well. What happened, what were the numbers, ultimately what the turnout was. And as I've been saying for a while, turnout is going to be dire. Turnout is going to be dire. I had someone comment on one of my recent videos, even saying even they didn't realize there was a local election going on in their area. I'm not surprised. I am not surprised. There has been so much inactivity around some of this stuff, and it's kind of insane. But I think the turnout is going to be dire. But yeah, and there's already people, like I've said, trying to bake it in. That, oh, if the turnout, like for Labour, is lower than 27%, that'll be disastrous for them. And you're like, I've said this before, turnout in my area for the last local election was 25%. Turnout for local elections keeps on getting lower and lower and lower. They are dire. So if you think people are going to go out and vote, more people are once again not going to vote than actually do vote. This is going to be, I think, one of those elections around that. But anyway, speaking of elections, we want to go back and once again have a look at the Canadian election, because that happened on Monday. And now that the dust has all settled there, turns out they had what we call a Portillo moment. So for those who don't know, the Portillo moment was back in 1997, where the Conservatives took an absolute thrashing to Tony Blair. And everyone was sort of hopeful that, oh, well, we can see this thrashing is coming. We're getting it. But hey, at least, right, we've got, Portillo. He's the guy who's going to lead us into this new wave of conservatism. He'll do a good job. Oh, Portillo's just lost his seat. Now who's going to lead us? And the exact same thing has sort of happened now in Canada with Poilievre having his own Portillo moment, or losing his seat. So certainly the Canadian Conservatives are going to have a very big internal discussion about what happened, why they lost. Ultimately, of course, it was a massive rejection, of course, of Donald Trump and the MAGA-style populism movement that Poilievre tried to replicate in that way. And it was a massive rejection of that. And over here, you've got currently two candidates. You've got Kimmy Badenoch, sort of, dabbling in it now and again. And ultimately, her successor, Robert Jerrick, who is doing exactly what Poilievre is doing, copying from that MAGA playbook, being, a little bit too close to Donald Trump in some of his statements, although you'll notice he's distanced himself from those. Many people have when they've seen the polls and the reaction to that. So we're going to have a look at a Canadian Conservative who's written a piece for Conservative Home about what his thoughts on this are and what British Conservatives can learn from Poilievre and the Poilievre-Portillo moment, as he says it is. So let's have a look what he has to say on this. But once again, fascinating insight on this. But yeah, a lot of coping in a moment. But before we do get onto that, please do remember to click on the like, the share button, and of course, down below there's the Patreon page, there's the Buy Me Coffee link, there's the YouTube thank you button, and of course, as always, there's the Pony Club. And of course, yesterday was Wednesday, so if you are a member of the Patreon or you're a member of the Pony Club, that's the YouTube subscription button down below. Go check that out. So we did a bit of a local election predictor for you. So let's see what we've got to see today. So, Guy Miscabel, what lessons can British Tories take from Poilievre's Portillo moment? So, if you don't know who this guy is, Guy Miscabel is the director and pollster of JL Partners. He's a former special advisor and former consultant to the Canadian the Conservative Party of Canada. So Interesting. So this is what he starts off with. 4 months ago, I wrote confidently, in 2025, Pierre Poilievre will become Prime Minister of Canada. How wrong I was. Oh boy, you were. But hey, at least he's honest. At least he's honest about that. Because you've had a lot of Conservatives who were predicting that Poilievre was going to win, and that this was going to be like a victory for conservatism around the world. No, he really didn't. He didn't win at all. Like I say, he ended up losing his seat, as he says here. Poilievre even had his Portillo moment, losing Charlton. I had mine. Of course, now repeating, of course, Gove's famous, infamous miscall that Portillo would shape the future of the right. At a final tally, the Liberals ended up around with 169 seats, just shy of a majority. The Conservatives made gains, finishing on 143, but far off where they'd expected to be in January. Not exactly the track record a pollster wants. So how did it happen? And this is where we now will start to get the coping. Canadian watchers will know also very well that by 2024, Poilievre had built a very much commanding lead. Justin Trudeau, fatigue was very real. The cost of living pressures on housing, immigration, groceries, crime had put Liberal failures now front and centre. Not only that, Poilievre wasn't just in the right place at the right time, he was the right man at the right time, having warned about all the dangers of inflation caused by Liberal policies for years, and he looked like the answer. Except, bear in mind, inflation that the Canadians were having wasn't being caused very much by their policies. A lot of that stuff was being caused by, once again, COVID. So many countries still dealing. We're almost about there. We're almost back down to the rate where inflation was caused where inflation was before COVID kicked in. The big problem we're seeing now is, of course, those Trump tariffs massively kicking in America at the moment, but also keeping things high around the world when inflation was on the way down until, of course, the Liberation Day. But anyway, there you go. So, two things, of course, changed. First, Trudeau was replaced by the uncontroversial and very competent, I like that, and competent Mark Carney. Second, Donald Trump, of course, re-emerged, dragging Canadian politics into his orbit with a provocative call to make Canada the 51st state. And that is why the Conservatives lost. That is why the Canadian Conservatives lost so much. It was Donald Trump making that call for Canada to become the 51st state. Even on election day, Trump was tweeting out, guys, vote for the Conservatives because that guy will make you the 51st state of Canada. Canada like the 51st state of America. And he was tweeting that out. And you're like, do you just want to guarantee Mark Carney's win? Do you want to guarantee his win? Anyway, so that second shift was fatal. Nothing is more politically toxic for Canadian Conservatives than being seen as Trump adjacent. In 2021, my focus groups were full of warnings, saying they're just like the Republicans. It was always unfair, but the same thing happened in 2025. The more Poilievre was linked to Trump, the more damage it did. And that is because what has been happening is the, quote, culture wars. Every conservative movement around the world copied the Republicans' culture wars. The Canadian Conservatives more so, thinking that was going to be their path to victory. That was going to be how they get back into power. And they were copying the Republicans. It all, as he said, all goes back to 2021. You'd think that if you were having such a perception problem, you would deal with it back then. It wasn't just, quote, unfair. It was accurate. It was accurate. It wasn't just unfair. Those people saying that were accurate. They doubled down on it going into this election. Trump won, started saying all that stuff about making Canada the 51st state. And once you've, said how much you like Trump, how much you would, bend the knee to Trump, you can't walk that back. So the big question always was that the Liberals would win. It's just how much would they win by? How much would they win by? And now we know. And now we know. So instead of the cost of living, managing Trump became now the ballot question. Because during elections, sometimes things like that can happen. You always have a general election about something, the big topic of the time. Over here, 2017, we all remember that election. Everyone thought that was going to be the Brexit election. It wasn't. It became the pensioner heating allowance election. Because you've got to be able to pivot. You've got to be able to be nimble, to be able to talk about that stuff, and to have the talking points to be able to do that if the question around the general election changes or becomes something. That is common and should be knowledge for everyone going in. But the Canadian Conservatives didn't. They just went and just destroyed themselves over this issue. And, they gained seats. But at the same time, their leader lost it. Lost it on a quite significant scale. So, of course, the ballot question, with, of course, now the threat of the tariffs looming, the new Liberal leader and former central banker and esteemed economist suddenly looks now like a safer bet. And hey, a lot of people have been writing about this at the moment. Might do a video about it later, but sometimes it comes down to the very simple question. I think it was the Bill Clinton election, the early 90s, the infamous quote, "It's the economy, stupid." Why did Americans vote en masse for Donald Trump? They, for some God knows reason, thought Trump would be better for the economy than Joe Biden. Even though Biden had, Kamala, even though Biden had shown he was good with the economy. Go to Brexit. Why did everyone vote for Brexit? They were told, if you do this, the economy will be great, wonderful. Why do so many Liberals lose? Because sometimes, hey, it's the economy, stupid. And when it comes to sometimes economic issues, the left side, our side, sometimes does not talk about that very well. Does not have very good talking points. Its arguments can be difficult. They don't think about them. They don't think about how it comes across to other people. And guess what? They end up losing. Jeremy Corbyn, went through two elections, 2017, 2019. And when it came to the economy, in 2017, Corbyn was better on the economy, I would say, when he was running in that election than he was in 2019. Because the 2019 manifesto was just so full of stuff. It was just difficult to sell to people. Just so much full of stuff. It was like, how do you sell this? What's the story we're trying to, you're trying to tell people? Yeah, that policy is a good policy, but I've said this before. Free broadband, we cannot do free broadband or approach that policy again for still a good while because of how bad and toxic and a joke Corbyn made that policy. But that policy is a good policy because we see how well it works in somewhere like South Korea. where it adds billions to the economy every year. But we can't go anywhere near it because Jeremy Corbyn. Punchline of that election really is. Really, really is. And still a lot of people can't admit just how bad those campaigns really were. But anyway, that's going into another topic in a video. But anyway, back to this. Of course, the ballot question, of course, changed, and with the CPC's fortunes, just as it did in 2021, when they were, of course, set to win, only then to have a resurgent wave of COVID change the election into now a question of who would manage the pandemic. And Conservatives, again, did not come across as they would be the ones to manage that pandemic. And you would think that if you've lost those two elections, going into hard right-wing populist movements, maybe you shouldn't be going in that direction. Maybe it should tell you something about the electorate in general. That's the lesson you should be learning. But we'll see what he says are these lessons you should learn. So, of course, what does this mean for Polvia, who many British Conservatives have held up as an inspiration? That's true. And he lost. There has, of course, been much sniping about the campaign direction and its strategy, often from people positioning now for the aftermath. But step back for a moment. The CPC's vote share of 41.3% is, of course, the highest since 1988. And they made significant gains in the so-called 905, named after the area code that surrounds Toronto, such as Richmond Hill, as well as York, Windsor, and Kinchester. And these were, of course, former Union strongholds. The path now to a future Conservative government is clearer. Is it? Why did these people, did they change to Conservative in the recent election? What was their reason for changing? You don't seem to fully understand why they changed. Was it a rejection of the Liberal Party? Was it something else? Was it that, there's all sorts of questions still to be answered about this, but this is the cope. You're now saying, well, we might have lost, but look, we did really well in this areas. We got a high vote share. Once again, like our election, you do not win on vote share. You win the election, just as you win here, by how many seats you win. It's the same in Canada. It's a parliamentary system. Vote share does not matter because you are fighting, and especially in the UK, 600 different election battles up and down the country. And what matters is how many battles of those can you win? Because if you get the seats to form a majority, you win. Simple as that. And so many people do not understand that, as we saw in our last one, where you saw people on the right and, of course, people on the left saying, well, what a loveless landslide. Vote share doesn't matter. It's all about the seats. All about the seats. And it goes to show you how people misunderstand how they win or lose elections. But there you go. So, what, of course, blocked it was the near total consolidation now of the progressive vote, with the NDP, the traditional leftist party, slumping to 6.3% and only 7 MPs. The resulting tactical vote brought the Liberal vote to 43.7%, ending, of course, Tory hopes. And yet, tactical voting, once again, a story of that election. You want to make sure the Conservatives get in? Well, your traditional leftist party might not be the best way to stop them getting in. Simple as. It is, of course, easy for the Conservatives to, of course, be disappointed with the result, but even easier for them to fairly ask how they lost a 25-point lead. Some might even blame the leader, but that wouldn't be fair. No, it would be fair. It would be fair. He was the leader. He was in charge of the campaign. He was the one who could if he wanted to, have pivoted into an anti-Trump stance. But guess what? Mark Carney did that better than anyone. And I will echo what other people have said. It is really good. And what Mark Carney has said, to see someone from, our side talk about nationalism in such a good, positive, and progressive way. And it's a shame more of us on that side don't learn that, because that is a lesson to learn from this election. So, as I wrote just early in the year, much of the gain was down to Poilievre's very authentic communications and leadership style. Really, the infamous golfer ad of the two white men wearing golf gloves was mocked mercilessly in Canada, and by everyone who saw that ad. It is so out of touch, so horrific. And yet, it's an authentic communication style. These two people playing on a golf course. Anyway, and the fact that, of course, they were tied to a compelling worldview. His worldview. No, it wasn't his worldview. It was Trump's worldview, or the MAGA worldview. Another leader might, of course, shed a few votes come election day, but only because they started from a lower base, right? Really. So the cope, I'm the way I'm understanding this cope. This is like the only so far I've seen Canadian Conservative coping about this loss of this election. Seems to me, and I can predict it now, that the cope being is we only lost because we started from a lower position. If only we had started from a higher position, maybe like this time, we're starting from a better position, that we can win the next election. Gee, sounds awful lot like our Conservatives, doesn't it? Anyway, a more, of course, credible criticism is this election became a referendum on Trump, while the CCP stuck very rigidly to the planned cost of living campaign. You should have pivoted. Election campaigns have failed and stuck on this before. You didn't pivot. That's certainly, of course, the view of some, but the debate over it has now sparked a minor conservative civil war, and it points now to a deeper risk. A one-note conservatism, now unable to adapt when the ballot question shifts. So that certainly is true. But it was a referendum on Trump. It was the fact that Canadian Conservatives have been cozying up to Trump, cozying up to the Conservatives. The electorate is not dumb. They noticed and they can see that. You should be probably saying more about that, but we'll have a look into that. We'll follow that hyperlink later. Maybe that'll be the next video. Who knows? But the question is, what should British Conservatives take from this? So, when the fundamental issues now dominate, whether it is the economic or security-based, there is no value leading on secondary issues. So, basically, lead on the primary issues. Gee, what magical advice? Talk about issues that matter most to the voters? What advice? What advice from the gods? I know my sarcasm's so subtle, isn't it? Anyway, as of course for the CPC, Poilievre now intends to stay on. Really intends to stay on? Anyway, and unlike in the UK, he can do that without a seat, at least for now. The Liberals now face the baggage of 3 terms and mounting economic headwinds. Another election in 18 to 24 months is, of course, not beyond the realms of possibility. And if Carney hasn't made significant progress, you would expect him to lose the rematch. Really? Oh, don't worry, we'll win the next one. Gee, exactly, exactly like our Canadian Conservatives. Oh, don't worry, Star will screw up sooner or later. Meanwhile, Rachel Reeves have just had one of the biggest endorsements of the British economy, coming from, I think, a big American central banker, saying like how good Rachel Reeves, as what they've done for the economy. But anyway, yeah. Anyway, British Conservatives should take 3 lessons. 1, authenticity builds momentum. 2, if you can't adapt, it doesn't matter how right you are. And 3, if the left unites, you lose, no matter how good you are. We are right to, of course, look for Canada now for answers, even even when more right to look for warnings. If that is what you are taking away from that election, then just like our Conservatives, they are learning the wrong thing. Let's see what they've got in the comments. Um, so 3, if the left unites, you lose no matter how good you are. Interesting note, of course, to end on. This, of course, suggests that the left progressive parties are now favored by the majority. But can the right actually win on a good day, even when the stars align? If the left-leaning voters are not organized, a tacit admission that the most now are now left-leaning view in the world, and it all takes is now good luck or some skullduggery to slip in a right-wing government. It is an absolute delight to watch the Trump lover get an absolute damn good political kicking, in the same way it's absolutely terrifying absolutely gratifying when any bully gets, of course, their just desserts. Hopefully there is a lot more to come on that in the next few years around the world. Very true. Someone says here, it was Trump. If Trump had kept quiet, Carney would have lost. If Trump did not keep quiet, even if a monkey could have won. Yeah, it was Trump, all Trump, and Mark Carney did that. And hey, Mark Carney is a smart guy. He's gone through a lot of crises. He will be very, very good, I think, for Canada. They've got a very good person at the helm. Let's see if there's any more good on this. Someone else says, yeah, the takeaway from the Canadian experiences is if you support Trump, you're out. Very, very true on that. Yeah, I mean, that is the real lesson from the Canadian elections. You know, Poilievre supported Trump. He dabbled in this light, like Trumpism light, and the Canadians, you know, they sniffed him out. They sniffed him out. And when Trump came out and saying, hey, I'm going to do all this, I'm going to make you the 51st state, I'm going to put all these tariffs on you to try and force you into that. Do you want the guy who is going completely, you know, I know what to do with the Canadian economy. We need to sort of make fundamental changes. We need to move away from America being our like main partner. You know, Mark Carney said when he won the end of like Canadian-US integration is now over. I have said it, and I will make this prediction again. I think you're going to see Canada adopt a lot more European standards. Of course, that's not going to make Trump and Americans, of course, very happy. But I wouldn't be surprised to see that. I would not be surprised to see that, because one of the big things that has been stopping the Canadian EU agreement, I believe, is disagreements around regulation, more so from the Canadian side because of their trade with America. And the fact it has been, held up in a couple of other, European countries being very, very slow to go voting about it. That being the other thing. But now you've got that. Hey, if I were Mark Carney, I'd be flying over. I will be seeing Ursula von der Leyen. I will be going to those countries that haven't yet voted on that and saying, "Hey, what can we get this done?" Because it's been going for 10 years. 10 years at this point. We should be doing a deal with Canada as well. I would say you can't do a full trade deal yet, but you can build up to one by doing sectoral deals. I've said this before. That's what we should be doing with Canada. We should be looking, right, what stuff do we need at this moment more than anything? We need that lumber. Oh boy, do we need that lumber. Keir Starmer wants to, get house building going. We need to get that lumber. We need to get that Canadian lumber over here. Really get some good house building going over here with that stuff. But hey, well, we'll see. We'll see what happens. And I've said before, that is something absolutely we should be doing. And again, I do hope, as you saw from my letter I sent to Dan Jarvis in his response, he said he would bring that up, with other members in the House. So hopefully he does that, and hopefully they go in that direction where we should be really pursuing that. But anyway, as always, let me know what you think down below. If you are a Canadian, please do make me aware of any conservative coping going on. Please, send me the links or articles and stuff like that, because I am once again fascinated to see what is going to happen to your Canadian conservative movement. They will, I think, going to go into civil war. The fact that it said there that Poilievre isn't going to go, I wouldn't be surprised if that's raising a few eyebrows over there. But anyway, do let me know what is going on there, because I am very, very interested to sort of keep an eye and follow that of what goes on over there. But as always, thank you very much for watching. And of course, as always, we'll see you all next time.